So earlier this week, Blizzard had pushed out a new beta build, and this build actually came with a lot of dungeon changes. Not a lot of class changes, but a fair bit of dungeon nerfs and a couple of buffs here and there. So in this video, I want to quickly go over it. I've spent time this week, both on stream and off stream when I could after work, to figure out how these changes actually feel. So let's dive into it. So starting off, they did a general dungeon update. Like across the board, they have increased creature health and damage by 10% in all mythic keystone difficulties. Now, if you're not familiar, the coefficient scaling for most keys is roughly 10%. So this bumps it up about a key level. This doesn't really matter too much, right? Like the highest keys being done is relatively arbitrary just based on tuning and like what characters are able to do and what people are able to kind of figure out over the course of the seasonal cycle. So I'm not really too worried about this. Like whether we're doing an 18 or a 19 and the difficulty of that level doesn't really matter as much. This kind of matters in like going for like your 12 Resilient or your Keystone Master, Keystone Hero, whatever it might be, whatever accolade you're going for. But once you start actually getting into higher content and pushing into content, this doesn't matter, in my opinion, all that much. So for people who have been playing beta this week or plan on testing it this weekend and in the future, if you were doing 15s or 17s or 19s or 12s and all of a sudden keys feel a little bit harder, this is why. Anyways, getting into the actual dungeons, Magisters Terrace actually saw a couple of changes. They increased the timer by 30 seconds. This is obviously like a fine adjustment. I just personally have a weird thing with like 30 seconds, like not even numbered, like minute-based timers, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day, right? Now, the only two changes that we're seeing in here, though, is two bosses. The second boss, Saron Sunslash, he had this mechanic called Runic Mark, which originally applied 3 of them to your entire party, which is weird in 5-man content. So when it applied it to 3 people, it meant that there was a high chance that you were going to get it back to back. There was also a slim chance that you never get it at all. And this created this really like kind of negative feeling in the boss fight. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It created this problem where like if you were targeted back to back to back to back, you would eventually just run out of defensives and your healer might run out of cooldowns or ability to heal you. So the fight felt a little oppressive. Now, best case scenario when you have 3 targets is that 1 always goes on the tank and then 2 like swap between players. I hope that Blizzard does address this. There is still the issue where you can get targeted back to back to back, but the likelihood of that happening now is a little bit slimmer, obviously because this was like a 50% nerf to how many targets are being afflicted. With this change, you know, I can see an argument to like never put it on the tank and just have it rotate between like your healer and DPS. I would like to see a world where if the first round of Runic Marks targets your healer and DPS number 1, the next set should target DPS number 2 and number 3. So it rotates. Now, Blizzard has done this in the past with different mechanics, Dawnbreaker being notably one of them. Some of the mechanics in that fight, if it targeted you, it couldn't target you again the next time the ability was cast. This is kind of like an underlying mechanic that most people aren't aware of unless you're doing high end, because it's how you think about your cooldowns. When you get targeted, you're like, well, if I'm getting targeted here, I don't need to worry about getting targeted on the next one because it's just not going to target me because the game's coded like that. So I was thinking that they could do something like that with this boss, but if not, 2 is totally fine. The fight to me, though, now feels like really dull. I wouldn't be surprised if they like upped the damage of this, but we'll see. And Degentrius. I can never Degentrius. There we go. Holy shit, English. Is this even English? Is this even a word? Anyways, Unstable Void Essence. So if you're not familiar with beta dungeons or Magisters Terrace, basically this is the volleyball boss if you've seen clips. The idea is he'll throw out this unstable void essence and you stand in it to soak it. And you have to soak it 4 times in a row and you have different quadrants. So players kind of spread out and you take turns like soaking based on the quadrant it's going to. It's like playing volleyball. It used to apply a dot to the player that soaked it. And when you got this dot in combination with other mechanics that were going on in the fight, it was really, really scary. And so there's this like domino effect or like this multiplicative factor where it's like, yeah, if you soak, you're fine. Or if you have the dot, you're fine, like from the orbs. But if you get both, you're kind of fucked. And so it was like, it left you in the state where you're like, I don't know when to use my abilities or I don't know when to use defensives because like I'm about to soak and I'm about to have the dot and I could use the defensive, but what happens if I get targeted with both or like have to soak and get targeted? And then it's like, oh, now I'm dead. So this change is pretty good. Basically now the healer is really just spot healing the player who's affected by the orbs. I don't remember the name of the mechanic. Anyways, moving on. Maisara Caverns. Now, these changes are pretty minor. Carry and swoop on the first boss. This is when Necrax is going to charge a player. The freezing traps now highlight. So this is just a quality of life thing. It's hopefully trying to solve the issue of like when you've never seen the content before for new players, it's trying to tell you what to do. So when you do get targeted, the traps light up, kind of trying to indicate you, hey, you gotta walk into them. Is this super clear to some players? Probably not, but it is a quality of life change that I think they're fine. And you're gonna see this kind of change actually a little bit later down when we talk about some other dungeons like Pit of Saron. Also, the hulking Juggernaut. The deafening roar was reduced by 10%. This was, I'm assuming, to combat the general aura buff by 10%, to keep it more in line, or to basically just make it have more health, but like not do more damage, is at least my assumption. This is just basically like a big AoE damage event that players should be aware of and healers are going to combat. Outside of that, Maisara wasn't really touched. Now, Nexus-Point Xenas. Now, this is a dungeon that I wasn't even able to finish because we were just like, the group I was playing with, we were just kind of like struggling. Or we ran into bugs where like the second boss wouldn't spawn. So this is a big one. So they have increased the enemy forces required by 4%. I'm not a fan of this change because they've done this a couple of times now throughout the course of beta where they keep increasing the amount of forces you have to pull. And while it was a linear dungeon and you had like a couple of different routes through each of the hallways, now it feels like you just have to pull everything, which isn't fun. Because there's some dangerous mobs that are worth good percent, but they're very dangerous. And there were some mobs that like weren't super dangerous, but weren't great percent, and you got to pull more of those. Or like you could be like, well, if we handle this really hard pull and we have CDs up, then we can skip other stuff. And now it's like, just pull everything. And while I understand the enemy force increase over the course of beta and in this recent build, it's just getting to the point now where it's like you literally hold W and pull everything that you possibly can attack, and you'll be good. Some people probably think that's good news. So, you know, there it is. Anyways, first boss. This was a weird one because this boss had crazy inconsistencies last week. This week, it seems like they've pretty much figured it out. Last week, there felt like there was an issue with like spell queuing. The spell pattern that the boss would do was not consistent. And so it would be like, we're going to spawn 3 beams. Okay, that's fine. And then we're going to spawn some swirls that you have to dodge. Okay. And then you can disable a beam. But then like at the rate that the beams spawned and the rate you were able to disable them was not consistent. And so you got into this weird spot where you basically just died. Like you just didn't really have any counterplay. And so Blizzard's solve for this is just significantly reduce the damage that the Leyline Array does, which is the beam, and the Arcane Spill, which is the poop on the ground. It was basically really, really punishing if you found yourself between like a rock and a hard place. You were just dead. And now you can like make the decision to like pop a defensive and run through a beam or run through the poop on the ground and you'll be good. This fight does feel significantly better, which it gives me a lot of hope, but we'll see how it plays out. I think this is actually a fight that's going to give a lot of people a lot of trouble, but I do like the fight. The encounter is pretty good now. Core Warden Maisara was actually buffed. So the Dread Flail ad has 10% more health as well. The Eclipsing Step was also increased to 25% initial damage, and the Light Scar Flare, which is the damage burn that you get every like 45 seconds or so, or every minute, is now increased as well. Honestly, this is fine. Like while it does, it's like, oh man, they buffed the boss. It just wasn't doing a lot of damage, and your healer has a 300% damage amp and a 30% healing amp during this phase when they're standing in the beam. They can also choose not to stand in the beam and just like natty heal through it, but also not take damage themselves. And so, yeah, these are all fine changes. This isn't as bad. Now, I wasn't able to get to Lothraxion, so I don't know what this actually basically means. It is a buff. Divine Guile now pulses damage every 2 seconds instead of every 3. And then Core Exposure, the damage vulnerability reduced from 50% to 20% per stack. I wasn't able to get to this boss week. The group I was playing with, I was kind of getting late and I was getting tired, so I ended up dipping. But we saw the first boss, but then the second boss bugged out, and then we saw the second boss. But then when we were going to the first boss, we kept wiping. So I don't have anything to report on Lothraxion right now. But moving on. Windrunner Spire. This dungeon timer was reduced by 1.5 minutes, which is kind of like whatever. It's fine. If you were really clean in this place, you didn't really have any issues. The issue with this dungeon is the run back. Like you do get this bonus like boots when you do wipe and you've unlocked the boot checkpoint. When you click on the boots, you get like 200% movement speed or something like that. Like it's crazy fast, but you still have to run back to the location, which always takes time. So wipes are really bad in this dungeon, but I've had clean runs before this obviously like the creature buff. I had runs that were like 4 or 5 minutes under. So this nerf feels kind of okay. This is unlike Rookery. When they nerfed Rookery timer, that was just like, that was cursed. Anyways, they have nerfed the boss, kind of. The biggest nerf that we're seeing here is actually the turbulent arrows. So they've increased the knockup potency. So when you step in an arrow to dodge a mechanic or to drop your buff, this is now giving you more time in the air. So it's a little more forgiving. There was a problem with the ring, which is this billowing wind. When she did her blast and you had to dodge it with the arrows, you had to be pretty precise, not like super precise, but you had to be pretty accurate in when you moved in. Obviously some classes can skip over the ring with like Transcendence or Demon, the Warlock Portal, or Evokers can like, mages and like Evokers playing specifically Chrono Warden can like blink across it basically. So there's like ways around it, but if you weren't one of those classes, you had to be pretty accurate. And also when the turbulent arrows spawn, their impact is reduced by 50. So the problem is that this fills up like the entire room when she does this turbulent arrow spawn. And then if you stood in it, you basically got one shot. So it was a very punishing fight. This fight still has some issues to me. I think it punishes melee way too much. I don't know what they can do to combat that without like just changing how the mechanics work or the frequency that you have to like drop stacks or spread out. The rest of the nerfs here aren't like anything crazy. It's like this is the kind of AoE at the very end of a phase before you go into the billowing wind. The squall leap also, like, I don't know, it's just like pretty much a damage nerf across the board. The biggest change though was the turbulent arrows. Algeth'ar Academy. This saw a lot of changes, some good, some bad. So starting off, let's start actually with Veximus. So the Oversurge. This is no longer dispellable. Before, your whole like little metagame as a healer was like trying to figure out who you should dispel. Do you dispel like the person who's low health because they need to, you know, stay alive? Do you dispel the tank who just soaked 4 orbs in a row? It was kind of an interesting decision-making process. They have just made it no longer dispellable, which means that your only job as a healer is to keep people alive. Like, you just have to heal them up after every mana bomb and after every arcane fissure. They buffed the damage of arcane fissure, which I think actually has some issues, which I'll come back to in a second. Now, they did buff the damage vulnerability from soaking orbs from 200 to 500%. This is not currently implemented. I believe it's still 200%. So this is not something that we can currently test. This fight feels fine, but I have a sneaking suspicion that this number might actually get reduced back down to like 400 or maybe even 300. Because right now it's like you soak an orb and then you get targeted by mana bomb and then you get hit by fissure, and like this combination is just like a one shot, and unless your healer is like really on point or you have a health pot ready or you're really making sure you're using defensives, you're probably gonna die. So this fight feels fairly punishing even on just like a 15 level with full mythic gear, by the way. So yeah, the arcane fissure was buffed, which I think is weird. I'd like to see this actually get pushed back in the spell queue by like 2 seconds, because what's happening is basically it's frontal, then you soak orbs, then it's mana bombs, then it's frontal, orbs, mana bombs, and then it's arcane fissure. But the problem is mana bomb happens right before arcane fissure, which means everyone dips down really low who's affected by mana bomb, and then you just get hit with this blast, which now kills you. So this fight's actually pretty difficult now, but we'll see how it adapts over the course of the rest of beta. Overgrown Ancient also had some good changes. I think there's a better way to actually make this fight better. I think this is kind of like a band-aid fix in my opinion. So the Germinate arming time has been increased from 2 seconds to 3 seconds. Now, I originally was under the impression that this is when he does like the call forth or break forth or whatever it's called, when he like summons the Lashers to attack your party and ultimately the tank who's going to get threat. This is actually just like the swirl duration. They're probably going to change this fight because it does seem a little bugged. So basically when the swirls start spawning from Germinate, you now have longer to move out of them, which is good. It's better for casters. It might, like, you can actually like get a cast off now between each spawn. The problem is that his other spells are still in the same sequence. And so when he does do the call forth or break forth or whatever it is, it's only spawning basically 75% of the adds instead of all 100% of them. Like the last set that's getting armed isn't ready yet by the time he does his call forth, or I don't know why I keep saying that. And so it's like way easier than it probably should be for the tank at least. And they also nerfed the health by 10%. So, you know, this fight now just feels like an actual loot pinata, even though it's not, because it's Mythic Plus and you're not looting the boss afterwards. So yeah, good changes I think for Germinate, but it has messed with the spell queuing, which it will imagine Blizzard will fix. I think they could have just made this fight easier by capping the poison, but it's capped technically at 99 stacks, but you're dead if you hit that. Moving on to Croth. They nerfed the periodic damage of Blistering Fire and they nerfed the Deafening Screech. This boss is still a demon. I am going to dread doing this boss. I think it needs more nerfs. The issue with beta is, and I don't know what was causing it, but there was like a way to bug out the boss, and then it wouldn't do any mechanics at all outside of the blistering fire. Like it wouldn't do deafening screech. And the issue with this fight is by the end of the fight, and you're taking the blistering fire damage, and you're getting hit by deafening screech, it just eventually you just like your healer goes dry. There's a couple solutions I would think that Blizzard could do. They could, I think what they need to do is they need to change the health percentages of when the bird phases. I don't think it right now it's like 70 and 40. I think they can change it from like, or 75 and 40 or something. Make it 70 and 30. I think that would be a pretty easy solution. The tech right now is go wind first, fire second, lust on fire burn, and pray that your healer can keep you alive. This fight feels terrible though. Last but not least, Oragosa was also nerfed, or I guess you were nerfed in the fight. So they upped the damage of the dots, which makes it kind of actually a healer check now. And they reduced the haste you get from having stacks down to 5%, down from 8. Which means this used to be a damage buff. Now it's a haste buff, and now it's actually smaller. So getting hit is not necessarily the play anymore, especially if you're a non-haste class. And the fight just mostly feels the same. It just sucks that you don't get actually big damage amps. They did change the Corrupted Mana Fiend. It now targets 2 players, but they reduce the periodic damage. This is kind of whatever. I don't really care about this as much. It's mostly the bosses that I'm worried about. Seed of the Triumvirate. Health increased by 24% on the second boss, Saprish. Health also reduced by 9% on non-mythic difficulties, which I don't know what scaling happens here, but basically it was a massive health buff. And Shadow Pounds, they just fucking 50% amped the damage when it leaps, and it ignores armor. This is a really scary ability that I don't know what they can do. Like, maybe I'm wrong about this because I don't pay attention because it doesn't target the tank, but this needs to have an indicator on who it's targeting. Because the issue with this mechanic is it leaps on a player, does a bunch of damage, and it applies a bleed. It has really bad sequencing with overlaps from AoE damage from overload. And so if you get pounced on as the overload's happening, you die. Unless you're like super aware, your healer has you top, you're ready with a defensive, and you have a health pot or something like that. It's just like there's a couple times in the fight where it overlaps and that person just like straight up dies. I don't mind this damage being high, but there needs to be an indicator if there isn't one. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just like, I can't picture it. Maybe I have to go look at footage, but I'm pretty sure it just pounces on a random player. Anyways, also they buffed the third boss. So he now spawns 3 gates instead of 2. This isn't crazy. Like this doesn't really make the fight all that much harder. You just dodge orbs. There's also this weird thing where they can spawn inside of each other. And when they do that, it's like, okay, you just don't get hit. Easy. Moving on to Skyreach. This was a dungeon that was significantly nerfed in terms of timer. And the only thing that they changed was the second boss. So they made it where it's like a tank buster, but it isn't because it's avoidable. They basically made it so the vulnerability now doesn't affect all fire damage. It's only if you get hit by this multiple times in a row. The damage vulnerability was also massively increased. So basically if you get hit twice, you're dead, which it's avoidable. So like, just don't get hit is kind of my take. The issue is that some players like weren't aware of it. And so they would accidentally get hit. And then they would try to soak a beam, and the beam is doing fire damage, so you would die. So this is a very good change, and it just does way less damage. So basically, just don't get hit. That's it. This is a very simple change. Last but not least, we have Pit of Saron. This saw a lot of changes, and I want to talk about most of them. Some of them don't matter as much, but Pit of Saron is definitely getting like really good. The biggest nerf is like the Shadebringers. So they actually got rid of a lot of casters in this dungeon, which is really good. The issue that I was having is like, it felt like almost every pack or every other pack had casters in it with these Shadebringers. And so it was like really hard or difficult to like navigate the dungeon because you're trying to avoid casters ideally, or at least a lot of them. And it made navigating like kind of hard. And I can imagine for like pug groups or, new players getting into Mythic Plus, this would probably cause a lot of issues. So this change is really good. I'm not going to go over like every single location that was changed, but there's a lot less of them. First boss, Garfrost, was nerfed. His Kyro Stomp was nerfed by 11%, and Ore Chunk damage was also nerfed, and the travel time increased by 20%. So the Ore Chunks, this is when the ore or the ore blows up from either the tank crushing it or when he does Kyro Stomp. And so now you have more time. It felt really punishing. Like the travel time was really quick, and if you couldn't find a safe spot, you would just die. And now if you can't find a safe spot, you shouldn't die, but you will take a lot of damage, and you still have more time to get out of it, so you shouldn't get hit anyways. You can definitely feel this nerf. So these were good changes. Ick and Crick. Lumbering Fixation, it now grants Crick 100% attack speed while fixating a player. So the reason that they made this change is that some players were just soaking it. they were like, I can take 3 melees, so they would just pop a defensive. But now you have to like, it's basically like doubling the damage if you're going to try to just stand there and soak. Obviously, like really strong defensives or like immunities like Blessing of Protection will make this fine. But for the most part, it's just like, just kite it out. You kind of have to now. They also did Shade Shift. The duration was increased from 8 to 12 seconds. What is Shade Shift? Oh, it's just rod damage. Okay. So dot lasts, or like the AoE now lasts for a little bit longer. They also increased the blight radius from the plague explosion by 14%. This seems like a weird change to me. And now the blight, the shit that's on the floor, will now do damage every second instead of every 1.5. So you're basically Blizzard's trying to like lean it towards like you really don't want to stand in the blight that's on the ground, which that's fine. Like most players are doing that. They have nerfed how long it lasts, so it goes away pretty quickly. But basically, the room is going the shape of the room or the available space in the room is going to change based on like how you kite, where your tank drops off the tank buster, all of that stuff. And then finally, the last boss, they increased the health of the ads. That's fine. So this is all good stuff. Now they did buff a lot of the trash in here, which is definitely noticeable. It's nothing crazy, just like across the board, just they've increased the damage. It's just like this was not a threatening dungeon. A lot of people were doing this on 19s, 20s, 21s. So these should actually slow that down on top of all of the other buffs that they got. The biggest thing I want to talk about here is Nether Burst. So these are Arcanist cadavers. They spawn with like the Necromancer men who are like littered throughout the dungeon. These mobs have literally 1 health and they cannot be killed until their like Necromancer guy dies. The problem is Nether Burst. Not only is this like a minion, so if you have certain nameplate effects enabled, you wouldn't actually be able to see the nameplate. But the Nether Burst cast was like not obvious at all. It was just a little skeleton who didn't have a nameplate, just standing there casting. And this is like one-shots your group on high keys. They made this so obvious, which I'm a very, very big fan of. So now you'll know like, oh shit, that's the thing I need to kick. And I really like this design philosophy from Blizzard. I think when there is an important cast that is supposed to be interrupted and it is the primary thing you should be stopping, make it fucking obvious. This is such a good change. I really like this. Generally as a tank, I'm just watching this. I just like when I'm going in to group up the mobs, I set focus to the target and then I just will always kick it. It requires like 1 melee kick. It's like every 24 seconds or something. Yeah, this is like the thing you want to look out for. So the really good change. And then finally, they like reduced the damage of Dread Pulse, which is the Lich's mechanic when they hit 50%. This was like wiping a lot of people when you pushed Lich's below 50. Basically, you want to slow roll them to 50 and then you want to blast them down. So you take as little damage as possible. This being nerfed is really good. I'm not going to go over the rest of the stuff because, again, some of the stuff like doesn't really matter as much. So yeah, those were all the changes. I think this is moving in a pretty good direction. I'm really excited for the Dungeons in Midnight. I've been playing a ton on beta, and I've been having an absolute blast. I hope I don't burn myself out. We'll see. But I do think that the design state of Mythic Plus is moving in a really good direction. And while I am sad about the simplification of a lot of classes and my spec specifically, I do think the benefit is that when you get to focus on gameplay, and the gameplay is fun, engaging, challenging, it kind of takes away the pain of like your class is not as unique or complicated maybe as it used to be. And so now instead of focusing on your class, you're focusing on the mechanics. And when they design bosses well and design trash in a cool way, it's going to be a good season if you like that kind of stuff. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. Sorry it's a longer video, but I know you guys kind of like that. So anyways, I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.